Yes. Okay. So I'm leaving the admit to my co-host there. I'll get one more and then I'm done. Okay. Momentarily retired. Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody to our first Voters Forum via Zoom for the League of Women Voters of the Greater Chippewa Valley. My name is Luisa Gerasimo, and along with Susan Hall, I'm a co-VP of this excellent organization. And it is my wonderful duty to introduce to you our host, who is Ellen Oakes. And Ellen is a small business person, or was a small business person in Menominee and a county board supervisor for many years. A wonderful supporter of the League of Women Voters for even longer. She's now retired, and she helped found our new chapter just 4 years ago and is currently co-president along with Anne Marie McCullen. In addition, you should know that she is a big-time volunteer in our area, so we owe you a big thanks for all the great things that you do for us here in the Valley. And I turn it over to you, Ellen, and I'll go back to admitting people.
Thank you very much. I want to welcome everyone here today too. I think we have a really good program tonight, and I know you're all concerned about the situation with COVID and elections and various things that have been happening this year with regard to that. So talking about it with our board, we decided that we had so many questions ourselves that it would certainly make a good forum. Tonight's speakers will be Cheryl Miller, who is Town of Red Cedar clerk, and she will go first, and Julie Watke, who is our Dunn County clerk, she will be the second speaker, and Anne Marie will also be helping Cheryl Miller present some items with this. And then Deb Cronmiller will be our third speaker. She is the executive director of League of Women Voters Wisconsin. Now, I suspect sometimes I might be freezing up. I see my internet's a little unstable, so I'm trying to speak slowly, and that's not natural for me, so bear with me. So first of all, I'm going to mention that some of you may have heard the NPR program 2 or 3 days ago, which astonished me to hear that during the August primaries across the country, a lot of absentee ballots were sent in, and over 40% of them were disqualified. Very often for simple mistakes made by first-time absentee ballot voters. So the more we can talk about what we need to do to get it right, the better. And we're going to start with Cheryl Miller, again, Town of Red Cedar clerk, and she is going to talk to you now.
Hi, thanks, Ellen. Again, my name is Cheryl Miller. I'm the clerk with the Town of Red Cedar here in Dunn County. I'm finishing up my 12th year as a clerk, and I'm glad to be presenting tonight. On the screen before you, this is actually a flyer that the Wisconsin Elections Commission will be sending out on September 1st to everyone who, every registered voter who does not have already have a request for an absentee ballot on file. It's a 2-page form. It'll also have an attachment of an actual mail-in form if it's required. But right now at this time, I just want to touch base on a few things. In Wisconsin, you have 3 options to vote. You can cast your ballot at the polling place on election day. You can cast an absentee ballot in person before election day, and you can cast an absentee ballot by mail. You can request your absentee ballot online at myvote.wi.gov, or you can request one by mail. And all requests have to be into the municipal clerk by 5 p.m. on the Thursday before the election. You also must be registered to vote, and your name and address must be current before you can vote in person or request an absentee ballot. Anne Marie, next slide. Most voters will also need to show or provide an acceptable photo ID, such as a Wisconsin driver's license or state ID card or US passport. Unless you're indefinitely confined, then the photo ID requirement is waived. So if you're going to be voting absentee, please don't wait. We want you guys to request your absentee ballot early, and we'll go over that later with questions. On the next slide is the My Vote home screen. And this is where you can find your voter information, your polling place. You can find what's on your ballot. You can update your name and address. You can register to vote, or you can request an absentee ballot. You can also track your absentee ballot information if you go into the My Voter Information tile at the top of the screen. And then on the next slide is the On My Ballot tile on the screen. If you do click in on that, you can see your sample ballot for your next election. You can see all the important dates that you need for the upcoming election. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you can find your clerk information. So that was just brief, but right now I'm gonna hand it over to Anne Marie McClellan, the League's co-president, so that she can provide some information on the Vote 411. Thanks.
Thanks, Cheryl. Yeah, so the My Vote website is a key website for the government puts together for you to manage everything that you need to do to get a ballot. This Vote 411 is a website that the League of Women Voters has put together quite a few years ago, and it provides a lot of the information that you can get on My Vote, but it has additionally information that you can find out about your candidate's views on specific issues. So the League will send out a series of questions to all the candidates within a race. They receive the same questions, and then we request the candidates to go on to a special safe link to get into the website and answer these questions using their own words so that we can get an idea of where they stand. Sometimes candidates choose not to respond at all, and you'll be able to see that by a no response for the candidates. But it is a good way, especially in these times where we're all huddled up in our houses, to get in and find out more information about your candidate. It's vote411.org. Sorry, that dark blue is kind of unreadable. Also that I want to say again that the League of Women Voters, we don't support or oppose any political candidate or party. So these are all nonpartisan. And then this is what the website itself looks like when you go into it, vote411.org. You type in your address and it will bring up your voter's guide or what is on your ballot. If you go in right now, you won't see anything because the ballots aren't finalized, and you'll be able to find information starting September 16th. Okay, Ellen, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Oh, she's muted. We can't hear you.
Yeah, Ellen, you'll have to unmute.
There,
Thank
got
you.
it.
I clicked on unmute and your whole screen disappeared for a minute and it scared me.
Oh.
I think we're okay now though. Cheryl, you covered some of the questions I have in my list for you already with these diagrams. Do you want me to still run through them quickly?
Well, sure, because then we can just go through it real fast.
Great, yeah.
No problem.
So how do I find out if I am registered? I might have forgotten whether I did that or not.
You can go on to myvote.wi.gov and you can enter your information at the top of the screen. You can also contact your clerk, your municipal local clerk, to find out if you are registered to vote.
Okay, and how would I find out if my polling place has changed? You know, with some of the changes and people not wanting to be poll workers and polling places closing down, that worries me.
Yeah, most clerks would, post that or provide that in the newspaper, but you could also, what I would suggest would always be to call your municipal clerk just to be safe. It might also be, if it's updated, it would be on myvote.wi.gov. But I would definitely call the clerk just to be safe right before the election, because you don't know if they don't have enough poll workers, they might have to combine polling places, and that would be the best place to find out.
So can I see a ballot before I get my absentee ballot before I go to the polls?
Again, on myvote.wi.gov, it does show your ballot. If you can go on, if you're within the time frame when the ballots are prepared, you can go in there and you can see all of your local races and your federal and state races also. You can also always call your clerk. They can give you whatever information you need.
Now, I noticed that when you talked about asking for an absentee ballot, I mean,
Yep.
how do I do that again?
You can do it in person 2 weeks prior to the election. You can meet at the your clerk and do an absentee ballot in person. You can also request one by mail, and you can also go online to myvote.wi.gov and request an absentee ballot be mailed to you. The deadline on that will always be the Thursday before the election.
That's not much time to get it back to my clerk.
Nope, it's not.
Yeah. I'm afraid I'll make a mistake when filling out my absentee ballot. What areas on the ballot and the envelope are leave blank?
If you make a mistake on your absentee ballot, there's instructions in every ballot. So it would tell you that if you do make a mistake that you contact the clerk. The clerk can issue up to 3 ballots, just like if you were voting in person. So if you make a mistake, you contact your clerk right away. And then you asked about areas on the ballot and the envelope that you leave blank. Everything on the envelope needs to be completed. That's one of the reasons that a lot of the ballots are rejected, because the absentee envelopes do not have the voter signature or the witness signature or the witness signature or address.
The witness address too.
Yes, that's
Yep.
very important.
What type of writing tool should I use when completing my absentee ballot?
We always suggest that if it's an absentee ballot, to just use a number 2 pencil or a black pen. You shouldn't use red, and there's also instructions right on the ballot. Please don't use a permanent black marker, because I found out at the April election, it bled through the ballot and it wouldn't go through the machine, so we had to remake a whole bunch of ballots.
Okay, I lost the return envelope for my absentee ballot. What should I do?
Call your clerk, she'll get you another one.
I live alone in my own home. Now, this is something I have heard people say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have anyone to witness my absentee ballot. Do I have to have a witness? How do I get one? What exactly is the witness supposed to do?
A witness is required. You can contact a family member, or if somebody brings you groceries, or a neighbor, anyone like that, but you must, your absentee ballot certificate envelope must be witnessed, and the witness must add their address to it. The witness is supposed to see your ballot and watch you, not see what you're filling out, but watch you. I believe that's what it states on the certificate envelope, that they're supposed to you're supposed to mark the ballot in front of the witness and then put it in the envelope and seal it. And then the witness is supposed to sign their name and add their address. And they have to be over the age of 18, and they can't be a candidate on the ballot unless they're a clerk, but that would be in person. But yes, so that is very important.
And just to slip one in there from the chat box, Cheryl, can it be a husband or a wife?
Yes, it can be a husband and a wife, or a wife, as long as they're not a candidate on the ballot.
And it can be your pharmacist.
It can be your librarian. It could be anybody.
We have a couple other questions that are related to that were not quite answered. It is okay, Ellen, if I slide
Sure.
another couple in. So one person says that they are probably voting in person before the election. If they are, they're using an absentee ballot in the municipal clerk's office. Do I need to bring a witness with me?
Not necessarily. If they want to, they can, but usually the clerk would witness it.
Okay. Can the absentee ballot be dropped off at the polling place the day of the election?
Yes. As long as
Okay.
it's there before 8:00 p.m. on election day when the polls close.
Okay.
This is
Um,
Deborah, and I'm really apologetic about interrupting, but we did
Sure.
have some problems in Green Bay and Milwaukee where they use central counting locations. And in those cities, the ballot does not go to your polling place on election day. It needs to go to the central counting location on election day. And the WEC and MEC have guaranteed that they will do better advertising about that as we come into the November election.
Okay, thanks for bringing that up because we just count them right at the polling place. So I was answering on that note.
Yeah, that's the exception that proves the rule, Deb.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, resuming I have like 5 questions. Can I still vote at the polls if I change my mind and decide not to mail my absentee ballot?
The rules state that if you did not return your absentee ballot, which means if it wasn't mailed back or hand delivered, then yes, you can vote in person on election day. And there are questions that the poll workers need to ask somebody if it's designated in the poll book that an absentee ballot was issued. So yes, you can.
We've heard a lot about how slow mail delivery might be. How much time should I allow for my absentee ballot to get delivered in time to be counted?
A lot. At the August 11th election, I had one ballot that actually made its way all the way down to Nashville, Tennessee before it got to the person. So I don't know why that happened, but I would highly recommend, the post office sent us mailings saying 2 to 5 business days is typical for domestic mail to reach its destination, but I would at least double that. I would have to say at least 7 to 10 days just to be safe. If you're worried about mailing it back, make sure you hand deliver it to your clerk.
Or you can hand deliver it then. How do you do that?
Yes, you can call your clerk and make sure that they're there. You can hand deliver it. Our town hall has a mail slot in the door. Some towns might have drop boxes out there, or you can just make an appointment to go in and hand deliver it.
Just see what ours has. There's a
I
box.
saw on Facebook that if you mail your absentee ballot without a stamp, USPS will automatically deliver it. Is this true?
As far as I know, there's nothing in the statutes that would, or any policies that the post office will deliver mail without postage.
When you send someone an absentee ballot, don't you put a stamp on it?
Clerks are required to put return postage on any domestic absentee ballots.
What is the difference between mail-in voting, absentee voting, vote by mail, and early voting?
Well, absentee is where you cast your ballot. I'm not going to remember all that. So absentee ballot is where you cast your ballot, you put it in a certificate envelope, and you send it back. I believe early voting is where we don't have that here in Wisconsin at this time, but I believe that is where you actually could go in and cast a ballot and put it through the machine before the election. And what was the other one?
There were 4 of them, but you
Okay.
said in Wisconsin there are only 3 ways to vote, and you described 2 of them.
Yeah.
The third
Yeah.
way is to go to the polls.
Yeah, to vote, at the polling place on election day.
I know there should be no political advertising, even T-shirts or pins at the polls. What should I do if I see such things there?
Well, we have signs usually posted in there asking them not to wear any materials like that. I have asked people to cover it up or please remove it before they get into the polling place, or have the inspector would also do that. So I would just suggest that if somebody sees that, or that they should definitely let an election worker know that, so the election worker can go and speak to them.
Great. That's all the questions I have, and we have only 1 minute and a half left.
All right, we
Wow.
covered all of them. I think I was able to answer some of them in a private chat. We do have a quick question here about the September 1 mailing that Cheryl mentioned. Will
Yep.
that go to all persons who have previously requested an absentee ballot, or only to voters who have never requested an absentee ballot? Could you
It's good.
clarify?
Yeah, it's going to go, according to the memos that have come out from the Election Commission, That will be sent to every registered voter who does not have an absentee request on file currently for the November 3rd election. So if you've already requested one for November 3rd, you will not receive that as of the date that they mail it out, which would be September 1st, is my understanding of it.
Anything else for Cheryl?
I think we covered everything in the chat. I will just keep going with other questions as they pop up. Thank you.
Okay.
Great, thank
And
you.
there might be questions. Thank you very much, Cheryl.
You're welcome.
There might be questions at the end that Cheryl could answer too. We'll see what time is allowed. So our next speaker then will be Julie Watkey. She's the clerk for Dunn County. And I have a pile of questions for Julie as well. Here we are. I think that went pretty smoothly. So Julie, you can just relax. It's going to be good. Yeah, there's my phone. Yes. Yeah. Whew. So Julie, would you like to say a couple of words first, or shall I just start with questions?
Well, sure. I'd just like to introduce myself for those that don't know me. My name is Julie Watsky, and I'm your county clerk, and I've served in that capacity since September of 2013. Prior to that, I was a town clerk treasurer for about 15, 16 years, and also worked at the Wayceville School District. I think I just wanted to mainly start with a little bit of overview of what my role is in the whole process. I do really want to stress that the elections are ran by the municipal clerk, and any issues, although we can help direct any voters, need to contact their municipal clerks. They are the agents that issue all the ballots, do the registration. In Dunn County, there's 30 municipalities, and all information is entered into the WisVote system. In Dunn County, 27 of those are considered reliers, which means on the county to input that information into the statewide voter registration system. That entails any time to key registrations for them. Anytime a ballot is requested, that request is keyed. When a ballot is mailed, it is keyed. When a ballot is returned, that is keyed. All that information is taken from the municipal clerk and given to our office, and we key on their behalf. So when you go on the MyVote website and you see that, yes, my ballot is returned, that information comes directly from information our office is keyed in, with the exception of the 3 providers themselves. Other than that, we do all the ballot production for the county, all the programming of the election equipment, and resource for all of them. We do the, certify anything federal, state, and county. And so that's pretty much an overview of that. And I think you wanted me to talk a little bit about security, but some of your questions will lead into those topics. So I think we'll just go ahead with your questions if that's okay, Ellen.
That sounds great. Thank you very much, Julie. How can voters be reassured that the absentee ballots will not be viewed as fraudulent? I know this is a broad question, but this is what my husband keeps asking.
So I think in Wisconsin, we have a unique process where it is the municipal clerk who's in charge. So it comes down right to the initial request for the absentee ballot. It must be written. A MyVote request is considered written because the clerk will get an email from the MyVote system, and that is the written record. Along with that, the voter must provide a copy of photo ID, and the municipal clerk must maintain that photo ID on file. Once you have that photo ID on file, the clerk maintains it, and then that information is keyed into the WisVote. So the next time you would go in, you wouldn't be asked to upload a photo, and that requirement would already be met. After the request is made, well, if it's one that's through the MyVote, they would have to be registered first. If a clerk receives an absentee request, they first need to verify that the voter is registered. If they are not, the ballot would not even be considered to be issued. They would need to contact to get them registered. So then they actually verify all the information on the request. And then if all information, registered voter, everything's in line, they would send out the absentee ballot, communicate that information to us. So then the ballot actually comes back to the municipal clerk where they would review the certification prior to election. If there are any issues, it is the job of the municipal clerk to also contact that voter to try and rectify any of those issues prior to election. And if in case the voter cannot, there's avenues in place for the voter to either, get those rectified. So I just wanted to explain a little bit about the process, that it's a multi-stepped process in Wisconsin, and it's not something that you can just go download a ballot, send it in, and it's counted. So there are many checks and balances throughout the way. So I think I just wanted to start with that. So to be viewed as fraudulent, it's very hard. And some of the other questions that further down the line might get into some of that. But, the identity is verified by the municipal clerk. They view the certification, the photo ID, requirement of witness. Then and again, the polling place is verified by all the poll workers processing that absentee ballot. So I would say, there's just so many checks and balances in Wisconsin.
What about bulk mailing of absentee ballots
Right.
to voters who may have opportunities for multiple votes?
There's really not a way to have multiple votes because you're logged a number in the polling place. Once your number is there, you're not allowed to vote again. So there isn't really. The voter has the option. Pardon me?
That would be a myth.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
I think my interconnection is slowing up a little bit, so you'll have to be patient with me.
Probably mine too, I hope not. How can the name on the absentee ballot be assured of being counted, no matter how unusual or suggestive of being a particular race that name may be?
In Wisconsin, there is no bearing on what the content of the name is. The only check and balance as far as that would be the proof of identification, the photo ID met with the likeness of the person, and and the name conforms. There is no process that I'm aware of that would segregate out any names, gender, race, any of that. So
what is, I think you've talked about this already, what is your tracking system from ballot request through counting the ballot received? We covered that, didn't we?
yeah, that was kind of in the process that I discussed earlier on, the tracking in the WisVote system. Every step along the way, it's keyed. Even if a ballot comes back and is missing information, that is keyed into the WisVote system. So a voter can go on the MyVote website and do that at any time, as long as it's communicated and to the provider that's providing the information to the WisVote system.
What is the vetting process for the women and men who work at the polls?
Well, I really can't speak to that. I was explaining, the actual election is ran by the municipal clerk. So they would be the ones that would obtain all the polling workers. They do the training, they staff them. So I really can't speak to that because the municipal clerks are the ones that actually, obtain their poll workers. They are required to use a list provided by the parties, and a list of those poll workers is to be approved by their governing board every other year. So there is a process, but I couldn't speak to the difference on how because each municipality obtains their own workers.
New voting machines are going to be available for the spring elections at the polls. It is now being determined which will be purchased in Buffalo County. What reassurance do we as voters have in knowing the security of them to ensure confidentiality? What new features do they have which would support this?
Well, in Dunn County, we haven't made the step to say that we're going to have new equipment in the spring. Again, I'm going to stress the equipment is owned by the municipalities. They own their equipment. The programming and such is done at the county level, but the machines are owned by the municipalities. Our election vendor did notify us that our units are going to be decommissioned at the end of 2022. So we've been in talks with the municipal clerks I think we met last September of 2019, had them start doing a little budgeting for that. We do need to find a vendor that is all inconclusive for both the county and the municipal needs. A large part of that is the programming and the ballot production that is done on the county end, very costly. But the actual machines themselves are owned by the municipalities. In doing that, we more than likely will stay with our current vendor, not meet those all the realms of the request for proposals that we would need. The security levels alone for programming, the county is responsible for the programming. However, we contract out with our same election vendor that is the vendor for the equipment. There's so many federal and state guidelines in place as far as your staffing, your building structure. You can only have so many windows. Your facility has lots and lots and lots of federal and state security guidelines where the county wouldn't even be in a capacity to program those cartridges ourselves with the security measures in place. So going forward, I have talked actually with the Towns Association and some of the clerks, and we were in the next few weeks going to be looking at which municipalities will be interested in making that purchase to upgrade their equipment with the potential to possibly use in the spring. But I foresee Dunn County going in a wave of replacements. Some municipalities are ready, some are not. As far as the features they have, most of the newer equipment, these equipments are HAVA accessible. That's the main purpose of them, is for the handicap accessible voting. Most of the replacements we're looking at would be a 1 unit versus 2. It would have all the HAVA equipment, all the HAVA compliant requirements, and then also would be able to tabulate the ballots. So municipalities would be going down from 2 voting machines to 1, which would gear more towards a paper ballot in Dunn County versus the touchscreen. None of our equipment in Dunn County is hooked to the internet at all, and none of the prospective equipment that we're looking at does as well. So there is no vulnerability as far as internet or being hacked that way. So, and that's about the status of where we're at the election equipment in Dunn County. And I can't speak to Buffalo County and what they've purchased or what their processes are, so.
Julie, that's great. Could I ask a follow-up question from the chat box? Sure. How can people be sure that the ballot processing machine doesn't change, say, every 15 votes to another candidate? At least the scanning machine prints a readout of how you voted and you can view it.
Tabulator just tabulates your paper ballot that you've marked your line on. Those are all visible in a recount and like the ballots are reviewed on election night by the inspectors for write-ins and such. The touch screen, I think there's a little, that actually also creates a paper record of the ballot that we currently use. I'm not sure if that answers what you're looking for, or, but there is always a paper trail that's auditable.
I think not everybody is aware that the ballot that you feed into that machine that goes snatch is actually then saved in a big pile to be checked against. Exactly.
Right, and they are stored for a statutory amount of time. All ballots with a federal contest are actually in my vault in storage for 22 months after an election. All equipment is tested 2 times before each election by the municipal clerk. They have a pre-lat test and then a public test that is viewable to the public, where they test the accuracy of those machines on the scanning. So that's another mechanism that's in place.
The person who asked the question updated hers to say that she did mean the touch scanning, that the touch scanning prints a readout of how you voted so that you can view it.
Correct.
So as I understand what you're saying, the paper, those of us who vote on paper where it's sucked into the machine, that paper is kept. So if there's any issue, it can go back and check that against
and be manually
the machine.
recounted. That would be the paper record of the ballot, the actual ballot that you marked.
Okay.
And the roll of paper from the other machine is also kept.
Correct. Those are ballots. They're held in the ballot bag, zipped in the ballot bag, held for that same statutory retention time.
I have to say that I was involved in all this about, is it 20 years ago those were acquired? Close to that, isn't it?
I think right around 2003, 4, right there, right around there. They're aging to about 17, 18 years
And
now, our equipment.
I was very impressed by how thorough and how careful and how concerned the clerks all were. I was on the county board at that time, so and I thought we did it as a whole county rather than as individual municipalities.
Back at that time, there were grant dollars available. At this time, there are not grant dollars available. So each municipality will have, and back then we did it all as a group purchase. We're still in a way doing it as a group purchase, but they will be billed individually rather than one prospective purchase.
Okay.
We'll reap benefits of group purchase together as far as price breaks on those machines. So.
With all the talk of voter fraud, how can you assure me that my absentee ballot will not be tampered with and that my vote will actually be counted?
That's a really hard question. So again, I'm going to go relay back to that whole process of all the checks and balances along the way. As far as if it's tampered with, if a ballot is not sealed, the clerk would contact the voter. They do have the right to spoil that ballot and, remake that ballot. But again, it's those same checks and balances that we have in place all the way from issuance to counting at the polling place.
One more, and I don't know how many Louisa might have. If hand delivering one's ballot, how do I know where to take it? I have heard a rumor I can drop it off at your office, Julie.
Yeah, that was a rumor going around last week. But unfortunately, the state did not allow the collection at the county level. It's just not feasibly possible. We don't central count in Dunn County. And if someone were to drop that off at 7:30, there's no way for us to get it out to the polling places. They need to make arrangements with their municipal clerk. I know for November, several municipalities are considering drop box locations back in April. So my best advice is to contact your municipal clerk.
Louisa, do you have any questions for Julie?
Cheryl just wanted to confirm that the clerks also do a pre-testing and a public testing, which Julie did mention, to make sure that the ballots that are marked are being picked up correctly. We did have a question of how would I know if my absentee ballot ended up being rejected, which is a great question.
That is a great question. So in that information that the clerks all give to us, after the election, the whole election is reconciled. Some of the self-providers do parts of theirs. Otherwise, the county reconciles all theirs in the state system. And if your ballot is rejected, it is keyed to that effect in the WISVote system with the appropriate reason why it was rejected. So you would get credit. Well, it depends, but if you cross-voted in this last election, you got credit for voting. But if it was rejected, your absentee ballot was rejected, say you didn't have a witness signature or you didn't sign it and it wasn't rectified, it would be rejected for that reason, and the My Vote system would reflect that if you pulled up your absentee ballot.
So in other words, if you vote absentee, you would not find out if you had made a mistake until after the election. Is that correct, Julie?
Well, it is the job of the municipal clerk to view those as they come in, and if time allows, they try and contact them to rectify those ballots and correct those. That's not always feasible based on the timing of when they come in. Obviously, if they come in the mail on election day, that's sometimes not possible. But if you ever have any questions, feel free to call my office, your municipal clerk. We will guide you through the process. We're here to help. So.
Great, thank you. I think that finishes the ones that I've seen in the chat.
Thank you very much. And Julie, thank you very much 15 years ago to witness the purchase process. And
My pleasure.
Yeah. Okay, so our last speaker tonight will be Deborah Kronmiller. And again, as I say, she's the Executive Director of League of Women Voters of Wisconsin. I have met her several times at state meetings, and she'll be speaking to some wider issues. She had a list of questions sent to her, and she incorporated those into her speaking. So Deborah, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you. And thank you to the whole Greater League of Women Voters, Greater Chippewa Valley, for putting together this forum. I love your title, Casting Your Vote in Wisconsin. Get ready. That's great. I really want to send a special thanks to Ellen and Anne Marie. They really helped me prepare for this evening and connected me to the program. I'm always very happy for the opportunity to share thoughts and address questions. Your local members send questions, and I have tried, as Ellen just mentioned, to incorporate those into my comments tonight. Let's all just acknowledge that we're on the cusp of an election like no other election. Our work is to ensure that every voter in Wisconsin can safely access the ballot box. Today, due to concerns about contracting COVID-19, more voters are turning to the use of the absentee ballot. In Wisconsin, any registered voter can request an absentee ballot. The League is playing a critical role in promoting this information and guiding all voters about the steps required to request, complete, and successfully return an absentee ballot. Because of the pandemic, in the past two elections and the special election in the 7th Congressional District, we've had to pivot from our tried and true messaging about how Wisconsin conducts its elections. Our work on the election protection front has also had to change. Collecting election observation information is no longer done by a few very well-trained in-person observers, but by everyone willing to complete our voter experience survey. Additionally, our Get Out the Vote messages have also taken a new form. Not being able to safely interact with public at events, at farmers markets, conducting forums and the like, we've had to develop new messages. Messages transmitted now on social media about how to register online, how to request an absentee ballot, how to access information about the candidates on the ballot through Vote 411, how to vote safely in person on election day if that's your choice. The League has had to set up efforts to ensure everyone has access to the technology and support needed to register and request ballots online, to identify a witness to sign your certification, to ensure that as many voters as possible vote early, thereby creating a safer polling place for those who do need to vote in person on election day. As we celebrate the 100-year anniversary of the passage of the 19th, we are acutely aware of how important it is for everyone to be able to vote. The 19th Amendment was a great start toward enfranchising women, but we know it did not enfranchise all women. Today, we still work to ensure that the barriers to accessing the vote are removed for all. We are directly contacting voters who are in the younger demographic to encourage them to establish the lifelong habit of voting, starting with this election. We're reaching out to eligible voters who are not registered with important information on how to register and how to vote. In advance of tonight, I received a couple of questions from you about voter suppression in Wisconsin. Voter suppression, unfortunately, is still all too real in our state and our nation. In the last 10 years, we have seen the purposeful disenfranchisement of voters as our state laws have been modified to create a need for voters to display an ID. We watched as our district lines were gerrymandered to keep the elected officials in the majority in their selected offices despite the popular vote. And most recently, we saw the federal court rule to reduce the time frame for early voting to only 14 days and to expand residency requirements to 28 days from just 10 days. Though the League has brought legal challenges to most all of these actions, we have not always prevailed in securing the relief needed for voters. Though we did have some successes, like in April, when the Supreme Court upheld the decision of the Western District federal judge that ballots should be counted that are postmarked by April 7th, the election day, extending the time for ballots to be received by 6 days enfranchised almost 80,000 additional voters in April. This same relief will not be extended in November, so it's crucial that voters request and return their ballots as early as possible to ensure their vote is counted. Luckily, the Wisconsin Election Commission is working hard to serve voters in this state. At the request of the League and other voting rights organizations, WEC is contacting eligible but unregistered voters to encourage them to register, and will be sending all registered voters an absentee ballot request form for use in November, as we heard earlier from the clerks. These actions by WEC will ensure that voters have accurate information from one official source, hopefully reducing voter confusion and resulting in greater turnout. The League right now is working to ensure that we are doing our part to get out the vote in November. As we encourage voters to vote early and safely from home, we will be participating in the National Voter Registration Day in September, the National Early Voting Day in October, and we'll be promoting videos and written instructions on how to successfully navigate all the steps of completing an absentee ballot. We're standing with the LWV US to ensure that the United States Postal Service has the funding and the commitment needed to successfully deliver all mailed ballots. And for those that do vote in person, we are actively recruiting poll workers to ensure that polling places are open and accessible. We'll be promoting the CDC's safety guidelines for all poll workers and voters, and we will ensure that curbside voting is available at all voting places. The League is currently awaiting a ruling from the Western District Federal Court, where we are seeking a COVID-related relief for voters who request their ballots timely but do not receive the ballot in the mail. We have asked for these voters that they have the option to have their ballot emailed to them. Emailed ballots have been used successfully for voters in Wisconsin for years. In these very challenging times, and given the experiences of some voters in April and August, we feel that the option to print out your ballot is necessary to ensure that everyone can cast their vote. Finally, I was asked to discuss our involvement in the Wisconsin Voting Rights Coalition and the efforts that we're engaged in. The coalition was formed in 2016 and is larger today than it has ever been. We are currently working with our partners at Wisconsin Voices, All Voting is Local, Souls to the Polls, Conservation Voices, Common Cause, Voting from Home, Election Protection, the Lawyers Committee, the Center for Secure and Modern Elections, unions, Represent Us, Campus Vote Project, and many more. Together, we are coalesced to get out the vote. Together, we are recruiting poll workers, educating voters, and advocating for those in jail to be able to vote, and working with the DMV to stand up temporary service sites before the election to assist voters in need of a voter ID. The League and the Coalition continue to advocate for the automatic voter registration in Wisconsin. Under this act, eligible voters who interact with the government agency would automatically be signed up to vote unless they decline. To date, 12 states have passed this legislation, and with the League, the League was the instrumental force toward its passage in those states. The coalition is planning now so that every voter who might see or experience something unusual during this election knows how to contact the voter hotline at 866-OUR-VOTE. Education, election protection, and accessibility are key for November and for all elections. Voters should not have to choose between their health and their right to vote. We are entitled to fair and safe elections. For over 100 years, the League of Women Voters has been committed to empowering voters and defending democracy. We have been leaders in the democracy space and are using our strong and trusted brand to fight for representative government. Critical to our ongoing success will be our ability to partner and learn from new organizations and members. Our commitment at all levels of League to become a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive organization will help inform us and the decisions we make on how to do League. We must look within to understand that as an organization of mostly white, mostly well-off, and mostly older women, more and more we will not represent the communities we are a part of. In some areas of the state, this is already true. We have long advocated for policies that would bring greater access to services, more protection for our environment, justice in housing and in our courts, and we need our ongoing advocacy to be informed by all members of our community, not just those that know the League way. And as we purposely strengthen our partnerships, deliberately listen to learn with all those in our communities, we know that the impact that we have had in the past 100 years will be just a small down payment on the impact we will have in the next 100 years. I thank you all for what you do in League as advocates and leaders. This is a crazy time we are in right now, but working together, November's election will be successful, its results legitimate. I'm open to any questions you might have.
Louisa, do we have any questions for Deborah?
You have a question which may be for our local clerks more than our state level, but how can you find your clerk and polling place if you don't have access to the internet?
White pages at the library?
Yeah, I was gonna say, a phone call. Julie, does the county, if someone called the county clerk's office, if they just
We have a
happen to
directory of
that.
public officials as well. Well, any county office, they'll refer you to me or your,
And I would add, if you're rural and you know where your town hall is, at least on our town hall, it says the names of the officials. So you would have phone numbers and somebody to contact, usually on a piece of laminated paper glued to the front of your little rural town hall, where the sand and the gravel and the trucks are.
Any other questions, Louisa?
No, I think all of the questions that we had sent were answered by Deborah, and all I have for Deborah here are people saying thank you. We really appreciate your support, and we couldn't do what we do locally without you working at the state level. It's very encouraging for us to know that you're there and that you support the work that we do.
Well, thank you. And the League without its grassroots is not the League. So we all have a synergy together here.
That's very good. One of the advantages of Zoom is that Deb didn't have to drive 3.5 hours to get to us tonight. And we're so glad that she was able to join us. I think we should all.
I have to say, after all this time working from home, I welcome the time when I can come drive up and see you all in person.
Understood. Yeah.
I did see one part of a question that asked if the witness had to be a Wisconsin resident, and I don't remember answering that. And the answer is no, it does not. That the witness does not need to be a Wisconsin resident. They just have to be a U.S. citizen, 18 years or older, and not a candidate. So,
Thanks for catching that. I have that written
No
on a
problem.
small piece of paper, but as you can see, it's getting dark in here. So.
yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Thank you again. We are again thanking all of our speakers tonight because this was a very informative evening. There's a lot to know about voting in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin people are pretty good about picking up on it. I'm glad to see all of you here tonight. We are going to end with a short general meeting for League of Women Voters, but it's an open meeting. Anyone who has an interest in continuing with us, and it will not last long either. And I also want to thank, we have several people present in this meeting tonight who have been guaranteeing that the technology works, and I'm oh so grateful for them. Joe Hageman, Steve Hansen, and I have to say that our Luisa Gerasimo and Anne-Marie McClellan were backing them up. Very valuable to have that technology work, and I had my fingers crossed and it was good. So now, going on to the agenda for the general meeting, I call it to order at, what time do we have?